So today, our noon briefing will start with Mr. Máximo Torero, Chief Economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Mr. Arif Hussain, Chief Economist of the World Food Programme. They will brief, as you can see virtually, on the latest Integrated Food Security Phase Classification IPC update on Gaza. Mr. Torero, would you like to start?
Thank you so much. So what we are going to present today is the latest IPC multi-partner analysis that was conducted from 27th of May to 4th of June, 2024, and followed by a review by the IPC Famine Review Committee. This analysis factors in all the data and information available up to the 4th of June of 2024, and does not take into account the latest developments on the ground. Let me go through the key findings of this report, and for sure Arif will go deeper in some of this. First, the IPC acute food insecurity analysis conducted by a multi-agency, multi-sector analysis team in February 2024, released in March, projected that famine will likely occur in the northern governorates by the end of May, if an immediate cessation of hostilities and sustained access for provision of essential supplies and services to the population did not take place. Following this analysis, several important developments occurred. In contrast with the assumptions made for the projection period in the previous analysis from March to July of 2024, the amount of food deliveries and nutrition services provided to the northern governorates increased, and this appeared to have temporarily alleviated conditions in the northern governorates, and in this context, available evidence does not indicate that the famine is currently occurring. In the southern governorates, the situation deteriorated following the renewal of hostilities in early May. A high and sustained risk of famine persists, so that's very important to underline, across the whole Gaza Strip, as long as conflict continues and humanitarian access is restricted. Given the unpredictability of the ongoing conflict and humanitarian access challenges, any significant change may lead to a very rapid deterioration into famine. While the whole territory is classified in emergency, this means IPC Phase 4, latest IPC findings show that around 495,000 people are still facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. This is IPC 5 through September 2024. This represents 22% of the population of the Gaza Strip, or 1 in 5 Gazans. Another 745,000 people, 33%, face emergency conditions. This is IPC 4. The latest data show that on a regular basis, more than half of the population does not have any food to eat in the house, and over 20% going entire days and nights without eating. When we look within the territories, if we focus on the North Gaza and Gaza governorates, in North Gaza and Gaza governorates, 75,000 people, 25% of the population are in IPC 5, catastrophe, and 150,000 people, 50% of the population, are in IPC 4, emergency. In the southern governorates and Rafah, in Deir al-Balah and Kanjoni governorates, over 350,000 people, 20% of the population, are in IPC 5, catastrophe, and around 525,000 people, 30% of the population, are in IPC 4, emergency. In Rafah governorate, 70,000 people, 35% of the population, are in IPC 5, and 70,000 people, 35% of the population, are in IPC 4. So what we are observing is that we have still extremely risk of famine, and over the 8 months of the relentless hostilities, characterized by bombardment and ground operations and the besiegement of the entire population, have led to these devastating consequences in the Gaza Strip. So it's extremely important that this is stopped, and it's extremely important that food access continues to accelerate to avoid this risk becoming a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Arif, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you very much. So let me just continue from there. One of the very key messages of this report is that as long as there is continuation of hostilities, as long as there are restrictions on access, the risk of famine for the entire Gaza Strip remains real and remains highly significant. That's the biggest message which is coming out. The second thing I would encourage people to look at the FRC report in whole, because basically what it does is it goes through different elements of food security, meaning it talks about availability of food. And on the availability of food, it talks about how the agricultural systems, which are supposed to produce food, a vast majority of them are destroyed, how the livestock systems are destroyed. And then it also talks about the second part of getting food in, which is through commercial and through markets. And it talks about how food may be available, but it is really expensive. It is out of reach for many, many people across Gaza, basically. And then it also talks about access, both physical access and economic access. In the sense of physical access, what that means is that are people able to produce their food? Well, not really, because they cannot go out or they're not in their places because they've been displaced. Or can they go to markets? That could be another problem. But also economic access, meaning do you have the money? Even if the food is available, do you have the money to actually buy that? And it looks at the flows of, how much money, like ATMs, how many banks are working. And those numbers are, in like less than 10% type of levels, both for ATMs, which are functioning, but also for the banks, which are functioning, but also are remittances coming in, and at what level are they coming in? So you look at, like I said, you look at it from the availability side, we have an issue. You look at it from the access side, you have an issue. Then the third part becomes about utilization. How are people using this food? Do they have what it takes to have decent food? Whether it is utensils, whether it's energy, whether it's fuel, no. So then we get into the fourth part, which is called about stabilization, because food is not about 1 day or 2 days. And over there also, obviously, the last thing there is stability. So when you look at it from all of these angles, what you find is that the conclusion that yes, famine remains a significant and elevated risk. It should not surprise anybody. That's one. The second thing I think, which is very clear, is that this, especially looking from March analysis to today, is that what improved situations was our access. More commercial was coming in. Let's say if you're looking after March and April, after the report came in, there was and also non-food items that started coming in. So very quickly we started to see an improvement. And past May 7th, that has started to go down in the north, but more importantly now in the south. So that's a very big issue. So bottom line over there is that if we have access, and in places where we have access, we can improve the situation. But if we don't have access, then it is not possible. Other thing which the report talks about is the necessity of multi-sectoral action. And over there, it is not, food is very important, but so is clean water, so is wash, so is sanitation. And this is becoming more and more important as people have been now displaced in the south from Rafah to the center. And we are talking about almost 1.82 million people in a very small area. I think the FRC report says that it is kind of like 28,000 people in a square kilometer, something like that. And what does that do? That makes things even more difficult in the sense of health, disease outbreaks, sanitation. And this is something which we are dealing with. Now, one other thing I wanted to, which comes out of the report, and I think the FRC team makes a very big point, is that almost saying that, whether it is classified as a famine or not is declared as a famine or not is not the point, because without their declaration, things are so very bad. And I just wanted to give you an example to make that point, that if you look back in 2011, the big famine in Somalia, where 258,000 people died, half of those people died before famine was declared. So it is not to say that, okay, yeah, there is a famine, now let's act. We must act and continue to act to avert a famine. And that will only happen if, number one, there is cessation of hostilities, there is a ceasefire. Two, we have access from the borders on the northern side, so commodities can come in. And three, because it requires a multi-sectoral approach, because it is beyond just food, it needs everybody. So WFP alone cannot do it. It is WFP and partners who all must have access to do what needs to be done on the ground to make sure that we continue to keep people alive. And the very last thing I wanted to say was that in order to have an effective response, three things are a must. Number one, we should have enough commodities, whether commercial, whether humanitarian, coming into Gaza Strip. Number two, people who are bringing this stuff must be safe. And number three, people who are receiving these things need to be safe. And if we can make sure of those three things, which I don't know how you can do without a ceasefire, then we can improve the situation. Otherwise, it is very difficult. Stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll turn into questions. Let's start with Gabriel, Al Jazeera.
Hi, this is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. Thank you very much for your briefing. You both talked about improved access. In the north, in the report, it says there was some improved access, and that staved off a potential famine. Does that indicate that the Israeli authorities have the ability to help in this situation if they so choose? Do you see it that way, or can you elaborate?
So what has happened in the northern territories, as you correctly pointed out, and it's in the report, is that there has been a significant increase of access to food and permits to be able to move commercial food. Now, we must understand that this population, the affected population, is a population that before the war happening was in very good conditions of health. And that allows them to recover very quickly if they have access to these resources of food and water, as Arif was saying, all the different elements that are required. And that's why they improve so quickly. If we were in another context where this population started being vulnerable, like we have in other countries in Africa, then this will have taken significantly longer time. So that's important. And for sure, of course, as we are saying, if the conflict stops and there is a law of humanitarian and commercial food to flow, then of course the improvement will happen as we have observed. But that does not mean that we have 96% of the population of the Gaza Strip in IPC4. That's 21.5 million people, no? So we shouldn't forget that.
Thank you. ED, AP?
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. Two questions. First, can you give us an update on what's happening with the aid coming off the U.S. piers? WFP had been in charge of logistics. Is any of it getting delivered? We know that there's a review going on. And secondly, there are reports that Israel has been told that the UN will suspend aid operations across Gaza unless urgent steps are taken to better protect humanitarian workers. Is that something that WFP endorses? Thank you.
So on the first question, I think what is really important to note is that anything which allows us to bring in more essential commodities, more food, that's welcome. But that also means that those systems, they need to pass the security tests. And for the UN, as you know, this is UNDSS, and there is assessment which is going on right now to make sure that it is doable and it is secure. And as soon as that is done, I mean, we would welcome the opportunity to use that facility, use that jailer. Now, from my executive director, from Secretary General, from everybody, I mean, safety and security of our staff is paramount. That's the first thing. So we will always take that first and foremost in anything that we do.
Thank you so much. Pamela, please go ahead.
Thank you to both Mr. Torero and Mr. Hussein. It's Pamela Falk. My question is a follow-up to Edie's. Could you tell us more about the floating pier possibility or past aid? It was damaged by weather, but then it was reported to have been repaired. Is it in a position to actually take in aid if all the checks that you mentioned are cleared? Thank you.
I think I think as soon as it is cleared, and clearance from the security side, but also as soon as it's ready and the security is cleared, obviously we have no objections to using that. And like I said, again, anything which allows us to increase the flow of critical humanitarian commodities into the Gaza Strip is more than welcome.
But just a clarification, I haven't seen, maybe it's out there, is it actually functioning right now?
As far as I know, is that there were problems with it a couple of times, and then it is ready to be used, but it has to go through the security side.
So
But
nothing.
Exactly what it is.
So nothing has been delivered from that yet, correct?
No,
Okay.
no, not right now. No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Deji, please go ahead.
Yes, Shudoji with China Central Television. I just read the report. It seems the truckloads, the flow of aids get into Gaza Strip increased a little bit. But if we break down to months, you'll discover that in May or early June, the number actually dropped dramatically. I just want to know, what is the trajectory you think this situation of the food security would be in Gaza Strip? And another thing I was wondering is, we know that our spokesperson here actually mentioned many times that there's a collapse of social order in Gaza Strip. How much time do you think would need to restore the social order so that to really deliver those humanitarian aids to people who need those things?
Let me start, Arif, if you're okay, and then you. So
Please.
on the first question, I think what is important of this report is that it clearly shows that if there is an improvement in the flow and access to all this food and water and so on, the returns are important and the risks are minimized of a famine. I think that's crucial. Now, that tells us that this can happen and can be done, and therefore we can reduce the current sustained risk of famine, which still persists and is significant in the location. The trajectory has variance, it's not stable, and that variability is a control variability depending on the level of permits and the level of access of trucks to the location. And that's what we need to minimize. And the hope is that we can have a positive trend of that will imply, of course, also the security attached to that. And also on the second part, especially in the northern Gaza, the ground operations continue with high intensity, and attacks in Jabalaya and city and camp continue to be important, which is displacing more people. As long as this continues, of course, this will exacerbate the social situation and could increase risks. But the evidence that this report is bringing up is telling us that this is very possible to improve, and that's why this has to become a positive trend of access to these needed resources.
Arif, did you want to come in?
Yeah, basically what I would say is that you have, there's no doubt that the humanitarian space in Gaza Strip, it continues to shrink. And that means that our ability to deliver safely and security also is shrinking. Now, the point is that if it continues this way, then the gains that we have seen past April, in April, they will be quickly reversed. And I think this is something which we need to know. From WFP side of things, we are assisting about 1 million people, but at the same time, we have stocks for about 5 to 7 days if they are not replenished. So we have fuel stocks for even lesser time. So this replenishment, this continuation of food and essential commodities coming in through the South is highly critical. It's really important for continuation of the operations.
Thank you. Mike, please go ahead.
Thanks so much. Thank you, gentlemen, for doing this briefing. It's Mike Wagon. I'm from I-24 News. I wanted to ask you here, according to the IPC's own definitions, in order to project famine with reasonable evidence, you've got to meet 3 different benchmarks. And the IPC in this latest report actually removed its projections with reasonable evidence that there is going to be famine in Gaza at phase 5 and phase 4 levels. At least 2 of those 3 benchmarks are nowhere close to being met, and I couldn't quite determine from what I've seen so far about the 3rd one. Why, with the IPC removing with reasonable evidence its projection for famine, and with the previous projections for famine being so far off the mark that we continue to hear from the IPC and from UN organizations more projections for famine? Why is that?
No, so let me be very careful on what is happening. So when they do this analysis and they have this 3 criteria, of course, that has to be met, their projections is based on the assumptions that the situation was going to continue as it was. So ceteris paribus, the point where there was no flow of food and availability of food in the location. As a result of that, the projection comes out and says there is a famine that could happen in this month to this month. What is happening right now is that realization didn't happen because there was significant change in the availability and access to food in the northern part. But what is still there is that you have a whole population in IPC 4, which is before IPC 5, which is the famine. And that's why the report is clearly stating, it's not stating a famine, it's stating a high risk and sustained risk of famine persist across the whole Gaza Strip as long as the conflict continues and humanitarian access is restricted. If tomorrow the humanitarian access is blocked, we will go back to the same situation as before, and the projections will be different. So again, it's very important to differentiate the assumptions that you have in a point in time and the data that is being procured today, which is telling us that that is not happening, but there is significant risk and sustained risk of famine to persist.
So I appreciate that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Hussein. I'm sorry.
No. Basically, what I was going to say is that, Máximo is absolutely right in terms of it is about what is the likelihood of assumptions going forward. But also, one other thing which is important to note here is that, the same systems which back in February told us that the situation was getting extremely bad on the food security side in particular, but also on the nutrition side from whatever data was generated. The very same methods of data collection and analysis also told us that the situation improved. So that should give us a little bit more confidence in terms of the methods. It's not skewed just one side. It shows you when there is a deterioration in the situation, and it also shows you when there is an improvement in the situation. And our job as analysts basically is to make sure that we report accordingly, whether it is on the food security side, whether it is in terms of people's consumption, in terms of people's coping, whether it is in terms of how markets are performing, whether what is happening with the prices. And the very last thing is that these are all dynamic things. I mean, food security by definition is dynamic, which means what is happening today may be different than tomorrow, and what is happening tomorrow may be different than day after, or maybe different on day after tomorrow, depending on what happened. But the underlying causes, this is why it is so important to say that, okay, what are the root causes down here? Well, one is the conflict, and two, it is access. So as long as those underlying causes are there, you're going to continue to see the movement or fluctuations in these things, depending on the intensity of the conflict, depending on how much access is there. So it is not that surprising.
So one simple follow-up and one lengthier follow-up. The IPC report, I think it was the last one, noted that there were 32, I think, reported deaths in March due to malnutrition or starvation, and 1 in April. Do you have a total number of deaths that have been reported in Gaza during the war as a result of starvation or malnutrition combined with disease? Are those figures available anywhere? They're not available anywhere?
No, I don't think it's even a matter of being available. I don't think that they are even collected. For example, if you look at the mortality figures in IPC, it is not mortality as in any mortality, right? It is mortality which is related to hunger, disease, hunger-related cause mortality. So in the data which was being collected previously, that did not differentiate between the two. The last CATI survey, which was done, there is a sample on that in which basically we have tried to look at a recall. I don't know exactly the length of the recall in terms of both differentiating both trauma and non-trauma deaths, hunger-related deaths. And when you look at that information, and this is in the FRC report, you will see that indicator has not been met. It is for adults is 2 per 10,000 per day, and for children is 4 per 10,000 per day. And frankly, it's neither one has been met, non-trauma. And I think that's one side. So there's no mortality data regularly collected. The second, the same thing on the nutrition side, but a little bit different. Because of what is happening, it is not like, you can go out there and you can do a nutrition service and all of that. So where the nutrition information is coming in from, that's from the MUAC, which is done associated with when you go and you do immunization of children, they also collect the MUAC data. Over there also it showed, what it showed in February, March was very close to famine thresholds. And by the way, over there at that time, the sample which was used was 2 years, 0 to 2 years, and this time up to children up to 5 years. So as space is there, or as we can, whatever we can do, it is being done. But remember, this is in the conflict zones, right? So even if we need to, methods like IPC, which has been in practice since last 20 years, is kind of designed to keep that also in mind. This is why what you see is that whenever there is some risk of famine or something like that, famine review committee is involved. And the idea of that is that for somebody, independent people, experts in the field, whether it's mortality, whether it's nutrition, whether it's food security, to actually look at the data and look at the modeling and basically say if it makes sense or not. And say whether something is plausible or not. So look, I mean, I'm emphasizing this because it's not an easy environment to do all of this. It's not like you can go and do a full food security assessment and say, let's go do a full nutrition survey or let's do a mortality survey. So given the circumstances, what is it that you can do the best? And this is why we say that in these type of environments, IPC is the gold standard.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Mike. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Sir Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic Daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. So you are saying there is a real threat of famine of about 500,000 people in northern Gaza, and the distribution of humanitarian aid is very limited, and the inflow of the humanitarian supplies are very limited. So do you see that in the near future we will witness mass death of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians if this situation sustained?
So, Máximo, if you might,
go ahead.
When we were sitting in February, we had a situation, very, very difficult situation, and we did an analysis. And out of that analysis, one of the outcomes was basically that famine is imminent by the end of May if A, B, and C does not happen, right? Right now, and then after that, what we saw that, there was more assistance which came in, especially in the north, and we started to see improvements. Right now, what is happening is that we are worried that the situation in the south is looking like that, and in the center is looking like that. And what we need to make sure, this is why we're here, we need to make sure that enough multi-sectoral commodities, and why I'm saying not food and multi-sectoral is because you need food, but you need water, you need health, you need medicine, you need, sanitation. All of that to come in for us to hopefully once again avert a famine-like situation or creation of a famine-like situation. That is the purpose. And the risk right now is that there are almost 2 million people congested in one place and in a very small place. People are talking about switch in terms of, running. People are talking about, in terms of coping, I didn't get into this, but, people selling their clothes to buy food. People collecting trash to get money to buy food and other essentials. So it is a very, very difficult situation. And our job is to make sure that we make everybody aware that it is a difficult situation, but if we do something about this right now, we can avert that. And how that can happen is ceasefire and our ability to get into these places with the right type of commodities, with the right type of help, so we can start to reverse this damage.
So let me add, the question is very simple, no? So we have more than half of the population that does not have today food to eat in the house, and over 20% go entire days and nights without eating. Now, what we are seeing in the northern part in this report is that there has been an improvement of mobility and access to food and to wash and so on. And that has created an immediate result because of the good initial condition that these people have. We also have 495,000 people still facing IPC5. So the solution is simple. This can be resolved if we do what Arif was saying, and can have a significant impact if we follow the stop of the conflict and give access to what is needed in terms of food, wash, and other important issues that are relevant to this multi-sectoral approach. So that's, for me, the most important message here. We shouldn't be discussing what could happen if, I think it's clear that an improvement can happen if things change today and we stop this and we allow to deliver food and know what is needed to this population.
Can I follow
Okay.
up?
Okay, one quick follow-up, and then we go back to Mike.
Thank you. I don't know how things will improve when there is one side determined to continue with this battle to the very end, even if every Palestinian in Gaza is killed. But I want to ask you about the breakdown of law and order. And Mr. Winsland spoke about some Palestinians were killed by mobs. But whom to blame? Why these things happen? You probably know the people of Gaza. Have you witnessed any kind of aggressive behavior from the people in Gaza before? And why this is developing now? Thank you.
So if you destroy all the environment of operation, if you don't have access to food, you're putting people in extreme critical situations, and that's what we need to avoid. I think what we are observing is an extreme situation where people are pushed to an extreme negative environment that is putting their lives at risk. And that's what needs to be resolved now. And I think that's what is important.
Thank you. Let's go back to Mike.
I'm willing to defer if somebody else has a first question. No? Okay.
If anybody else has a question, otherwise, Mike, please go ahead.
A question for you. UNRWA had taken their data offline a few days ago, but last they had online, on June 18th, there were 47 aid trucks in a row that were marked as looted. 47 in a row would seem like a concerted, coordinated effort of some sort to loot those trucks along the same route. Have you seen any coordinated effort, whether it's among armed gangs or other organizations, to loot those trucks, or is this an organic effort of desperate individual Gazans to loot 47 aid trucks in a row?
So I think I have not heard of anything which is organized or this is something happened. This is, you have desperate people who are doing in desperate times. They are doing desperate things, and but from what I know, I don't know, so I cannot say after that. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have a question either in the room or online? If not, then we come to this end of the briefing. Thank you so much, Mr. Máximo Torero, Chief Economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Mr. Arif Hossein, Chief Economist of the World Food Programme. Thank you for your time. Thanks, everybody. Steph will be with you shortly.